Welcome to this board training on the 10 basic responsibilities of nonprofit boards. This session is designed for adult learners who already bring experience, judgment, and commitment to the boardroom. The goal is to create a shared governance language, what the board owns collectively, what management owns operationally, and how individual board members contribute through preparation, judgment, philanthropy, ambassadorship, and accountability. Your learning objectives for this slide are to identify the core learning outcomes for this training and to connect board education to better boardroom judgment and conduct. A productive board training should produce shared understanding of authority, role clarity, and practical expectations. The key distinction is between knowing the list and using it. Board members should leave able to classify a board issue, ask the right level of question, understand where committee work supports the full board, and recognize when individual conduct strengthens or weakens the whole governance system. Your learning objectives for this slide are to explain the 3 broad roles that underlie the 10 responsibilities, and to recognize governance as institutional stewardship rather than passive volunteerism. BoardSource organizes board work around 3 broad roles: setting direction, ensuring resources, and providing oversight. Direction means the board keeps the mission, strategy, and priorities clear. Resources include executive leadership, financial support, board capacity, and public legitimacy. Oversight means the board monitors whether the organization is operating responsibly, effectively, legally, and ethically. The 10 responsibilities are a more detailed job description for these 3 roles. Your learning objectives for this slide are to distinguish the board's collective legal authority from individual board member influence, and to clarify why disciplined process protects the organization and the board. This distinction is foundational. The board has authority as a formally convened body acting under the organization's bylaws and applicable law. Individual board members bring influence, expertise, relationships, and fiduciary duties, but they do not independently direct staff, make commitments, or speak for the organization unless the board has specifically authorized them. This protects the organization, the chief executive, staff, and the board itself. Your learning objectives for this slide are to recognize the difference between governance and management, and to practice the noses in, fingers out discipline. The board should be informed, engaged, and curious, but not operationally intrusive. The practical phrase is noses in, fingers out. Board members should ask strong questions, test assumptions, approve direction, and monitor outcomes. They should not supervise staff, redesign procedures, or manage programs. The chief executive is accountable to the board for management, and staff are accountable through the chief executive. Your learning objectives for this slide are to preview the complete framework before examining each responsibility, and to understand the 10 responsibilities as an integrated governance system. The 10 responsibilities are not separate boxes to check. They work together as a board-level job description. Mission informs strategy. Strategy guides programs and resources. Resources require financial oversight. Oversight depends on legal and ethical integrity. Public standing depends on trust. Board capacity determines whether all of this work can be done well over time. Your learning objectives for this slide are to explain the board's responsibility for mission stewardship and to connect mission oversight with board advocacy. The board's first responsibility is to ensure that the organization has a clear, current, and compelling mission. Mission should be the board's first filter for major decisions. It should guide strategy, program choices, budgets, fundraising, partnerships, and public communication. Board members also have an outward-facing role. They should be prepared to advocate for the mission and explain why the organization's work matters. Your learning objectives for this slide are to explain why executive selection is one of the board's most consequential decisions, and to identify the preparation required before launching a search. Selecting the chief executive is one of the board's most consequential decisions. The board should not begin with a generic list of traits. It should begin with the organization's mission, current reality, strategic priorities, and leadership challenges. A good search process clarifies what the new executive must accomplish, conducts serious due diligence, and prepares the board to support the leader's transition. Succession planning is not only a crisis response, it is part of governance continuity. Your learning objectives for this slide are to describe the board's responsibility after hiring the chief executive, and to connect support, evaluation, and executive performance. The board's responsibility does not end after hiring the chief executive. The board must create a relationship that combines support and accountability. The board chair's relationship with the chief executive is especially important because it shapes the executive's relationship with the full board. Evaluation should not be a once-a-year surprise. It should be grounded in agreed goals, organizational progress, leadership quality, and candid communication throughout the year. Your learning objectives for this slide are to define the board's role in strategic planning and to distinguish participation in strategy from operational planning. Staff may design and manage the planning process, but the board is responsible for strategic direction. Board members add value by asking the right questions. What assumptions are we making? What trends affect our mission, clients, revenue, or partners? What must be funded? What must be stopped? A plan should guide decisions and monitoring. If it sits on a shelf, it is not functioning as a governance tool. Your learning objectives for this slide are to explain program oversight without micromanagement and to identify the information boards need to assess mission impact. Program oversight does not mean managing programs. It means ensuring that programs advance the mission, produce meaningful results, and use resources responsibly. The board should be deeply curious about impact. What difference are we trying to make? Who is served? What outcomes matter? Which programs are signature? Which are essential but financially difficult? Which may no longer serve the strategy? Good oversight requires evidence, not anecdotes alone. Your learning objectives for this slide are to explain the board's resource responsibility and to connect personal board participation with organizational sustainability. The board is responsible for ensuring that the organization has enough resources to fulfill its mission and does not commit to spending beyond its means. This requires understanding the revenue model and the risks in that model. Fundraising is not only the work of staff or a development committee. Board members should give personally at a meaningful level, help open doors, thank donors, and use their networks to strengthen the organization's resource base. Your learning objectives for this slide are to describe fiduciary stewardship as a full board duty and to identify key financial oversight practices every board member should understand. Fiduciary stewardship means the board holds the organization's assets in trust. Board members do not all need to be accountants, but they must ask prudent questions. Are reports timely and understandable? Are reserves adequate? Are internal controls working? Are audits handled independently? Finance, audit, and investment committees can do deeper review, but fiduciary responsibility still belongs to the full board. Your learning objectives for this slide are to explain board building as an ongoing governance responsibility and to identify the governance committee's role beyond nominations. A board's effectiveness depends on its members, expectations, culture, structure, and renewal practices. Recruitment should be tied to mission and strategy, not only to who is available. The governance committee is not just a nominating committee. It is the board's agent for long-term board development, expectations, orientation, education, assessment, leadership development, and renewal. Your learning objectives for this slide are to define the board's role in legal and ethical stewardship and to connect compliance, transparency, accountability, and public trust. Legal and ethical integrity is not a paper exercise. Policies matter only if they are understood, practiced, and enforced. The board should ensure compliance with applicable laws, bylaws, filings, and policies. It should also model transparency and accountability. High-performing boards aim above the minimum standard because nonprofit organizations depend on public confidence and trust. Your learning objectives for this slide are to explain board members' ambassadorial and advocacy roles, and to identify the communication discipline required to protect reputation. Board members are bridges between the organization and the broader community. They should be able to explain the mission, impact, needs, and aspirations in a concise and credible way. They should also understand policy issues that affect the mission. Advocacy is broader than lobbying, and it includes education, relationship building, and coalition work. At the same time, board members must respect confidentiality and know who is authorized to speak publicly on sensitive issues. Your learning objectives for this slide are to identify core categories for a board dashboard and to use dashboard indicators to trigger governance-level questions. A useful board dashboard is not a data dump. It is a decision support tool. The board needs a small number of reliable indicators that show whether the organization is advancing mission, managing resources, protecting against risk, and implementing strategy. Each indicator should lead to governance questions. What changed? Why did it change? Does the board need to approve, support, question, or monitor something differently? Your learning objectives for this slide are to distinguish individual conduct expectations from collective board authority and to name the behaviors individual board members must practice between meetings. Individual board members do not govern alone, but they do shape the quality of governance. Preparation, attendance, confidentiality, philanthropy, constructive questions, and advocacy are not optional extras. They are the personal behaviors that allow the board as a whole to meet its responsibilities. A strong board culture depends on members who understand the mission, respect role boundaries, challenge constructively, and carry the organization's story into the community. Your learning objectives for this slide are to apply the governance versus management distinction to realistic scenarios, and to practice reframing operational curiosity into board-level inquiry. Use this slide as a discussion exercise. Ask board members to classify each scenario. Approving the budget is governance. Deciding which staff member leads a program is management. Reviewing mission alignment is governance. Asking for outcome data is governance when it is about impact, not staff control. Thanking a funder is an appropriate ambassadorial role. Directing a staff member to change a procedure is management and should be routed through the chief executive. The goal is not to police curiosity, it is to channel it to the right level of responsibility. Your learning objectives for this slide are to convert the 10 responsibilities into immediate board development priorities and to identify 1 or 2 concrete practices for follow-up. This is the pivot from training content to board action. The 10 responsibilities should lead to choices about agenda design, committee work, board recruitment, dashboard reporting, executive support, fundraising participation, and policy review. The board should not try to fix everything at once. The practical next step is to select the few changes that would most improve governance quality this year, assign ownership, and create a follow-up mechanism. Your learning objectives for this slide are to summarize the core governance principles from the training and to reinforce continuous board improvement as the goal. The central takeaways are simple but demanding. The board acts collectively. Mission comes first. The board should govern strategically rather than manage operationally. Fiduciary responsibility belongs to every board member. Legal compliance, ethical integrity, and transparency protect public trust. Board members are ambassadors and advocates. Strong boards keep improving. They do not avoid every mistake. They learn, self-correct, and avoid repeating the same mistakes. Your learning objectives for this slide are to recognize the source basis and appropriate training use of the deck, and to identify where organization-specific adaptation should occur. This presentation is a synthesized training aid based on the BoardSource 10 Basic Responsibilities Framework and the provided training summary. It is designed to support board education and discussion. It should be adapted with the organization's mission statement, committee structure, board member expectations, financial dashboard, executive evaluation calendar, conflict of interest process, and current strategic priorities. For legal, tax, audit, or compliance advice, the organization should consult qualified professionals.